So today's video is about simple interest. So let's start with what is simple interest. So when money is borrowed. So in the real world, as you guys get older, there will come a time where you may go to a bank and ask them to actually give you a loan. Maybe it might be a loan for a house. Maybe it might be a loan for a car. But you're going to basically ask the bank, can you borrow money from them? And when you borrow money from a bank or a company or whatever, they will charge you interest, which is pretty much a fee that they're going to charge you for for allowing you to borrow money from them. So when you borrow money, interest is charged for the use of that money for a certain period of time. Now, when you pay the money back, so when you pay this money back to the bank, when you pay for your house or you pay for your car, not only are you going to pay the principal, which is the amount of money that was borrowed, but you're also going to pay back the interest, which is the fee that they tacked on for you borrowing their money. So the amount of interest depends on the interest rate, and that's going to be a percentage. And what you want to look for as you get older in the real world is you want your interest rate, or the percentage that you have to pay on top of the amount that you borrowed. You want that percentage to be as low as possible. So the lower the interest rate, the better it is for you. So when you're looking at credit cards, when you're looking at a loan for a house or a car, or even if you do something like a checking to go and things like that, you want to be asking them, what is the interest rate? Because that's going to be how much money you're going to have to pay on top of the money that you're borrowing from them. So what we're going to learn today is how to actually calculate simple interest so that when you do become an adult and you do get into these real world situations, you'll know what to do. So the amount of interest depends on the interest rate, which is the percentage, and the amount of money borrowed, which is called the principal, and the length of time that the money is borrowed. You pay less the faster you would pay it off. So how do you calculate simple interest? Well, option one is what we've been doing for this entire unit. It's setting up a proportion and solving it. Now, when you set up a proportion, your one proportion will be a percent proportion. So, a percent ratio. So we'll have percent over 100. The other ratio will be the amount of interest over the amount deposited and the or what we call the principal. The other option is to use a formula. So to use a formula, the formula is that interest would equal the principal times the rate, which is the interest rate or the percentage, times the amount of time, and that's measured in years. Some important things to remember when you're trying to calculate simple interest. Tip number one, when you're working with the proportion method of the formula, the time is in years. So if time is given in months, then you will need to convert the time into years. For example, let's say you're given 3 months. Well, you're going to have to change 3 months to years. And that means you're going to have to divide 3 by 12 because there's 12 months in a year. And this means that 3 months is 2,500 years. Tip number two, if you're using the equation method, the interest rate is going to be expressed as a percentage, and it's going to be necessary to change that percent to a decimal before substituting it into the formula interest equals principal times rate times time. So let's look at two examples. Here's our first example. We want to calculate the amount of simple interest on a $600 deposit at an interest rate of 7% for 2 years. So you're going to deposit $600, because another way that you can actually earn interest, and this is a great thing, is that you can actually put your money in a bank in different kind of accounts, like a savings account, and you can actually earn interest, which means the bank is going to pay you money for putting your money in their bank. So this is money that you don't have to work for. So you're depositing $600 and the interest rate is 7%, and you're going to leave your money in there for 2 years. And the question is, well, how much money will you have after 2 years? So you want to set up a proportion. So when you set the proportion up, it's going to be the amount of interest over the amount deposited, or the principal, equals the percent over 100. So we're going to plug in the values that we know, and then for the value that we don't know, we're going to put in a variable. Can't think right now. We're going to put in a variable. So We're going to start with looking at what we do know. Well, we know the percentage is 7%, so we can go ahead and put that into our percent ratio as 7 over 100. And we know how much we deposited, or the principal. We know we deposited 600, so that's going to go at the bottom, which means the value that we don't know is the amount of interest, which is the amount of money that the bank is going to pay you. So now what you're going to do is cross multiply. So you'll have 600 times 7 on one side and 100 times I on the other side. Then we know 600 times 7 will give us 4,200, and then 100 times I will still be 100I. We're going to divide both sides by 100 to figure out what I is, which means that I would be 42. So that means the interest is $42, but this is only for 1 year. So since the money will be in the account for 2 years, you got to multiply 42 by 2, which means the total interest after 2 years will be $84. Example 2. You deposit $2,500 in an account that earns 4% simple interest. How long will it be before the total amount is $3,000? So what we want to do for the second example is we're going to try option 2, which means we're going to use the formula. So the formula is interest equals principal times rate, which is the interest rate, times time. So again, we're going to plug in the values that we know and then solve for what we don't know. Well, we do know that if we went from $2,500 to $3,000, that means we actually earned $500 worth of interest, so that we know that the interest, I, is going to be $500. Then we know that the principal, which is what we started with, is $2,500. Then we know that the interest rate is 4%, but we've got to change that to a decimal first, so that's going to be 400ths. And what we don't know is the time. We don't know how long we'll have to leave the money in the account to get it to $3,000. So that's what we're trying to figure out. So again, we're going to do 2,500 times 400ths, simplify our equation, and we end up with 500 equals 100t. To get t by itself, we do have to divide both sides by 100. And that will give us that t equals 5. So what that means is it will take 5 years for the total to increase to $3,000. So in 5 years, we'll go from $2,500 to $3,000. And remember, this is money that the bank is paying you. You didn't have to work for it. You only had to just leave your money in the account, and it earned money for you. So simple interest, the important thing to remember is that interest is the amount of money that either a bank is going to pay you for having your money in one of their accounts, or money that you have to pay back for money that you borrow. And you can either use a proportion or you can use the formula.